The worst piece of hiring advice I ever received, the answer to that is hire for passion. I believed at the time, it seemed to make a lot of sense. And the way it was described was like, the best thing somebody can bring to the table is their passion for the art form. And like I said, I accepted that. At surface value sounds good, but it didn't work out for me. I think I listened to what I now think is not great advice, and I think it cost me. This is just my lived experience that I'm sharing with you all. So that whole event sent me on a journey to learn more about the research-based best practices for hiring that weren't based on subjective factors like passion. So starting with the job description should be about the skills needed. So many times at organizations, and I've been guilty of this in the past too, what we do is when a position opens, we start with the previous job description and figure out what needs to change, what needs to tweak, we make updates. And instead, what we need to do, the research says, is start with kind of a blank slate and say, what is the job ahead? What are the skills needed to do this? And skills are different than arbitrary standards. So we need to make sure we're talking about the deliverables needed, the actual qualitative, quantitative skills, not things like, oh, they need 3 years prior experience, or 5 years in a supervisory role, or so many job descriptions say master's degree preferred, or things like that. Resume review is not about weeding people out, it's about inviting people in. And that is such a huge shift for myself, and also a big shift from how most organizations, not just arts organizations, but a lot of organizations across all kinds of sectors hire. That means we're looking for minimum qualifications. We have our skills list that we flowed into the job description. So then, do they meet the minimum that we would need to entertain, could this person be qualified potentially for this job? Quantifiable impact, that's the other big thing we're looking at resume review, says the research. So it's not just they managed this or were responsible for that. Instead, it's what were the outcomes of that responsibility? Did they demonstrate not just what they've done, that they've done the job, but that they were good at the job? It's so important that we commit to a diverse first round candidate pool. I think probably I'm speaking to a group that all knows that. And the research shows that when there's multiple diverse candidates in the first round, not just one, not just token, whether that's gender, race, we can't always tell sexual orientation or disability from a job application, but as best we can, we want the most diverse pool possible, not just with one token outlier, because the research shows when there's only one, they're more likely not to advance. In fact, some studies show if there's only a token candidate, it's statistically a 0 chance that person will get the job. So when there's multiple of any kind of group or segment, they're way more likely to advance, not just to the next round, but all the way. So that first round pool is so important. The next thing we want to do is write questions to directly address the qualifications. So it goes right back to that skills list that we use to flow into the job description. And there are two main types of recommended best practice questions I've since learned. One is called behavioral questions, and those are the questions that are, tell me about a time when, you're asking about their past behavior. Tell me about a time when you've managed social media accounts for somebody else before, right? Why all this matters is because the biggest indicator of future behavior, future performance, is past behavior. Past behavior is the biggest indicator of future behavior. The other things important for interviewing, structured interviewing, meaning every candidate gets asked the same questions in the same order by the same method. And at every round of interviews, that's when subjectivity creeps in. I feel like I know you as a candidate. So whether the bias is intentional or not, it's actually like we have to remind ourselves as hiring managers to go back to the skills. So that's what that's about. And then the best way to do that is, the researchers say, use a rubric. So this is what the researchers call behaviorally anchored rating scales, but basically rubric ranking helps keep things more objective. And I'm happy to say I've done this for a few job searches now, and it actually makes things very simple. It can be a scale of 1 to 5, and for every skill we're searching for, and then we have a question or two that matches with every skill, and then you just rank it 1 to 5. Lastly, the research says don't trust your gut in absence of a very methodical approach. That's a real fast track way to open ourselves up to bias. And the truth is, we're humans. So anybody evaluating anybody, whether it's a job interview situation or just meeting somebody for the first time, even if not professionally related at all, we make snap judgments is where I'm going with this. That's what we do as humans. That's our brain trying to quickly make resolutions. That's what our brain tries to do, is make sense of the world for us. And those first impressions are almost always based on our own predisposition, which is another way to say our own bias. And then we often, whether we want to or not, use the remaining time we have with that person, again, whether just somebody we're meeting for the first time, professionally, interview or not, we often use the rest of the time moving to confirmation bias in our own questions and conversation and processes that follow. So the idea is challenge that. Another way to say that is no interviewing for fit. That's code for somebody who looks like me, acts like me, makes me feel comfortable. And all of this in the end, like I said, this is not comprehensive. This is the fast, how do we do this in 30 minutes on a Friday version. But all of this is shown to, in the end, save time, statistically proven by the researchers who've done this. And I think that's true. It's building a muscle. When I first started moving to a more process-based hiring procedure, I was like, wow, it's going to take me a lot of time, and I have to think of more methodical questions, and I really need to get clarity on the skills. But once I forced myself to really try to be more specific and work it out, it turns out it does make things a little easier and a little faster.